Popcorn Therapy, holistic health and wellness through the lens of pop culture. I'm Julie Peters. I'm a counseling therapist, a tarot reader, a writer, and a witch. I love to think deeply about pop culture and find out what our stories can tell us about who we are as individuals and as a culture, spiritually, psychologically, physically, and in all kinds of other ways. If you like that too, you are in the right place. Welcome to Popcorn Therapy. Welcome back to Popcorn Therapy, everyone. I'm Julie Peters, as you probably know, and this is part 2 of my conversation with Emilee Nimetz about the White Lotus Season 3. So we're just going to pick right back up where we started, and we're just going to continue the conversation on from here as we continue to explore the character arcs and all of the different things that came up throughout the show, not in any particular chronological order. So without further ado, please enjoy the remainder of this conversation with me and Emilee Nimetz about White Lotus. So yeah, you know, the person on the being fixed side of the equation is usually not great. You know, it's someone who either doesn't want to be fixed, or if they do, again, they're absolving responsibility to somebody else, right? Of like, that, you know, she'll do it for me or they'll do it for me or whatever it is. So I don't really have to take responsibility for myself because my partner always will. A lot of heterosexual relationships just are that way. I think it's like a really, really common dynamic on some level or another. But from Chelsea's perspective, like from the fixer's perspective, that's also not loving. No. Because what it is this is how I am needed, and that's how I will claim my right to be in this relationship, right? So it's selfish in its own way, you know. And again, just sort of to bring back the sort of Buddhist ethical perspective and so on, like, what does it mean to really be loving? I had a great Buddhist teacher, that Michael Stone, who wrote some books that were really, really good. He was an incredible teacher, and he came out as bipolar shortly before he overdosed on fentanyl, I think, and died. And so he had some addiction issues that he was actually just starting to kind of come forward about, like the real struggles in his life. And I feel like he's someone that the best teachers are people who've been through it. You know, the best teachers are the ones who really understand what it's like to suffer in those ways. You know, he wasn't coming from this place of like, everything's always been easy for me, so I'll just be a Buddhist teacher and I'll, you know, whatever it is. But he, you know, I was in a class with him once where he was teaching about love, and he was talking about how a lot of us love for what we can get. A lot of us love transactionally, you know, so that we can, usually for a lot of us, our belonging is insecure. And so we're trying to secure our belonging by being needed or being people pleasers or whatever it is. And so many of us are in love, in quote unquote love, because you play this role to me and that's what I need in my life. And so he talked about, you know, what it's like to love someone with non-attachment, which he described in a way that I'd never heard before, which is that non-attachment isn't don't care too much because it's all temporary. For him, non-attachment was actually care as deeply as you possibly can because it's all temporary. Like that you don't know how long this person is going to be in your life. So see them for who they actually are and like be in the joy of that for them. And so I don't think Chelsea or Rick were doing that. I think that they were using each other in those ways. And, you know, I think that heterosexual, well, at least heterosexual, I mean, I'm sure it happens in other types of relationships too, but that sort of fixer-fixie relationship is common, but it also can get violent, right? It can go to the extreme of like, you know, being addicted to someone because you think you need them or you think they need you, and all that stuff. And then yeah, I think I agree. Like what happens to Chelsea in the end is that he takes her down with him, right? That she was never going to win that quote unquote battle, you know, between them. His pain was always going to take her down. And when you are with someone because you think they need you and you can make their life better, whatever it is, you're not seeing them for who they are. And you're also endangering yourself in a situation like this where she didn't survive that relationship. And that's what happens sometimes. So, you know, I agree when I hear people saying like, oh, the pure love between Chelsea and Rick. It's like, no, that wasn't love. Like that was addiction. That was codependence. That was transactional, you know, and ended in horrible demise, you know, like, So that image at the end after, you know, when the two of them are in the pond, they're making the yin yang shape, which is just another beautiful, like White Lotus has just such beautiful sort of cinematography to it
Yeah.
and symbolism to it. There's moments like that, but I think it's a tragic thing. I don't think it's like a beautiful, ending or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Oh,
like,
yes.
yeah, it's like, well, maybe Chelsea had this moment of experience with Saxon where it was like, this is different than what I'm used to with men, where it's like, she's like with Rick, it's like she's chasing after him. She enjoys to chase him. Whereas with Saxon, it was like he was chasing her. And I think in that moment, like, she just, yeah, kind of was maybe shocked by that. And I do think with Saxon, like, I agree that there was a bit of a fuckboy energy where it's like he's like she was trying to give him this real authentic experience, which like you you let him come, like you went back, you're in this huge villa, and I think that someone, I think Evan Ross Katz said this on his podcast, but like you're in this huge villa and you go and sit in your bed, like that's a choice, like all of those things are choices. So it is like a little bit like, what did you want out of this for both of them? And
Yeah.
so like for him, I do still see it as like fuckboy energy, but the fact that she rejects him, and it's like no matter what, like his usual charms don't work anymore. And
Right.
one of the things that has changed is his, like, basically being sexually assaulted by his brother. Like that's like one of the things
Yeah.
that changed, and that's not something that you can just, like, there's maybe a window of time that you can push that down, but it's going to come up in ways. And it seems like for Saxon, like he can't ignore that, and he can't ignore what it's bringing up in him about himself, and like who he is, and in relation to his family and to his job and to women in general. And like, yeah. And too, it was interesting how he, like, at the beginning was like, when they were partying with the girls, and he was like, yeah, you always drink less than them so that you can be in more control. It was like, ew. And then like he ended up being like a victim of that, which it's like a little bit like, yeah, do you see how fucked that is?
Yeah, so I think toxic masculinity was an interesting part of this season of the show, and probably previous seasons too. I feel like it's come up
Yeah.
before. But yeah, I mean Saxon was such an example of that toxic masculinity, and it was interesting to see that the way that he was trying to teach Lachlan and the way Lachlan was receiving it. I think it was sort of an interesting take that Lachlan might have been a little neurodivergent, right? Like the idea that maybe he was just taking things a little too literally, right?
Hmm.
Like not kind of getting that it would be really not okay to be sexual with his brother. Like I saw some interviews with the actor, and there were different ways that they were kind of playing Lachlan. Like, is he trying to take his brother down? Is there some vindictiveness in this, or is it totally innocent? Like, where is he coming from? And I think from the actor's perspective, it was as he said in the finale, like he's a pleaser in a family of narcissists, and so he was just trying to do what he thought his brother wanted. And the actor was talking about how, in that early scene when he's kind of there, his brother is like, I'm gonna go masturbate in the bathroom because I can't do it in front of you, and he's naked, and Lachlan's kind of staring at Saxon's butt.
Yeah.
He was the Sam Nivola, the actor, was saying, I think he's sort of studying his brother. Like he really wants to be like him, and he wants to understand his brother. So he's studying. Like it's not a sexual gaze. It's sort of a curious, like trying to figure it out gaze. But I feel like if you think of Lachlan as an innocent in that way, he's just taking in the toxic masculinity, which becomes literally toxic when he drinks the protein powder that Saxon has already told him is supposed to taste bad, and you just have to take it like a man and all that. So he drinks it with the poison berries in it. And I mean, what a teenage boy thing to do, to just not clean out the blender and just be like,
Yeah.
I'll just add this. And knowing the coconut milk is off or whatever. And he's like, whatever, it smells fine. You're like,
Yeah.
what? Like teenage boys. Like, what?
Like,
Just
give it a rinse.
rinse it a little. Like, but I mean, symbolically, like he drank the toxicity of that, right? And it
Yeah.
almost killed him. And again, we don't get to know where Lachlan takes that. Like, what does he get to decide about what it means to be a man now, if his brother is not his model for that? And also for Saxon, if he realizes that model that he'd been giving was like really bad, what is the new model of masculinity going to be like for him?
Hmm.
And so, I think there's a lot of toxic masculinity in Rick. and I agree the dominance aspect of it, like him wanting to feel like he could dominate this old man, that's what made him feel better.
Hmm.
Freeing the snakes was like, that was a great scene, actually. That was just
Yeah.
really funny and weird. But it was one of those examples where like he endangered Chelsea specifically, like someone that he was supposed to love or someone that loved him or whatever it is, because he just felt the need to like make this big statement. And again, it's like it's that privileged thing of like just making these impulsive decisions and not considering who is going to be affected by that.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like in the end, Mook had some toxic masculinity, which, you
Yeah.
know, again, I think there are pieces that maybe we don't know in terms of like what it's like to be a Thai person in that society. I think she may have been trying to say something about like you have to live in this world. Like you can't. This is not a world where you can just embrace nonviolence without complications,
Hmm.
as you were talking about before, like it's easy to be non-attached when you have tons of money and everything that you need, but it's hard to take that sort of like extreme spiritual perspective when you're just trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
And so that may have been part of where she was coming from, is like maybe she did really like him, but she needed to know that he had some job security before she could be willing to kind of get invested in that, which is, it's one of those things where, like, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need to worry about that, but we don't live in an ideal world. And maybe
Yeah.
there are reasons that she would have needed to know that before she could make herself available to him. But it just seemed the whole time she wasn't that into him. And, like, it was just like, what is she getting out of this? Like, why is she doing this? So,
Yeah, I
from my
agree.
perspective, it did sound a bit like her being like, I don't know, I kind of need you to be a bit more of a man, which means I
Hmm.
need you to be willing to kill people and willing to take jobs with unethical or dubious ethics or whatever it is.
Like such an
Um,
extreme version of that too. It's like to be a man is to be a security guard who holds a gun and kills people.
yeah,
Like it has
exactly. Like
such a very,
so classically masculine, warrior
yeah,
masculinity. Yeah.
yeah, such an
Yeah.
extreme definition of that. Yeah, I agree. And what you were saying earlier about Lalisa being this huge, yeah, world famous star, and her role in the storytelling of this season was one that I agree. The whole time I was like, okay, so she's going to be kind of a clincher. And the whole time I was actually worried that she was going to be the body, like, because I thought when Sky Talk had that realization where he knows who the robbers are, he was going to have a moment of confrontation and that she was going to get in the crosshairs and that she would be a victim of her own toxic, like her
Yeah.
connection to that patriarchy too. But then I was like, there's no way they would kill like a member of Blackpink. Like people would riot over that. There's no way they could.
Well,
The
yeah,
K-pop
I mean,
fans would not abide.
context we don't necessarily know too, right? Like my husband loves K-pop and he's been following Blackpink and everything. Like he knows who Lisa is.
Yeah,
And he was talking about how the a lot of the K-pop stars are so closely managed, like their public persona is
yeah,
so carefully managed that he could see a world in which they were saying, okay, Lisa, White Lotus is the US show to be on for
yeah,
fame in that country. So we want you to be on White Lotus and like we'll pay the producers this much to get you on that show, but no nudity, no controversial storylines. We can't have her in any sort of violent, like there might have been all kinds of parameters around what sort of role she was allowed to play, because of that image part. So I don't know. I mean, like I don't have any
yeah.
information about that, but I think, that's a good point that maybe there was something going on here that was limiting in terms of what was possible for her character from that perspective.
I could see that. I do think that Mike White does whatever he wants. I did hear
It
an
is kind of
interview.
hard to see him being like, okay, I'll do that
Yeah,
for
I
like
don't think
I liked finding out that all the cast members are paid the same and they're listed in alphabetical order in the credits, and those are things that everyone has to agree to. Like nobody's the bigger star. Which I really liked about the show. It
yeah,
seems like if you're going on that show, you're a part of an ensemble cast and you're doing
yes.
whatever Mike White tells you to do, I guess.
Yeah, like I think that you really trust in his vision. And from what I heard about, like she auditioned just like anybody else. Um, so I really doubt that her management team would have any influence over the story. Like I think it would have been a situation where maybe they got the pilot. A lot of the time, in case anybody's curious about the acting world who's listening, you don't really often get the script when you're auditioning. You get the scene that you're going to read with the lines, and a lot of it's blacked out so that you can't read, there's no spoilers. But maybe if you're auditioning for a bigger role, you'll get the script or whatever. But yeah, she auditioned just kind of like a normal person. Like Mike White had no idea who she was when she auditioned, and she just like fit his vision for this character. So I mean, I could see it being a thing, but I also feel like I think that Mike White is like kind of like, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want, and y'all are gonna kiss my feet for it, and everyone's like, yes, you know,
And then
because
that's disappointing for me, right? Because like I'd
yeah,
sort of rather the story be that Mook's character was stilted by someone in some way, because I was, she was
yeah,
great, like she was doing a good job, and I feel like there was more in her face than she seemed to be saying, and like I wanted
yeah,
to know what it was, like what is her relationship with Guy Talk? Is she into him or not? Like, is she want to be with the bodyguards? Like, what's her perspective? And I feel like we just never got that. Like,
yeah,
not that there aren't. Well, actually, maybe we'll talk about this for a second, because I feel like Mook, her character was just a tool for the male's story,
yeah,
which I felt like a little betrayed by almost, because the characters tend to be so complex on the show. But it was really, by the end, it just seemed to be like, oh, this is just like part of how Guy Talk is going to make his decision of whether or not he's going to act in violence, because he's going to get the girl if he does, and that plays into his decision making process. And that was it. Like all
yeah,
those scenes together, all of that time kind of getting to know her, and or not getting to know her enough, and I just feel like we never really found out. And I feel like, I was kind of going to say there are a lot of complex female characters on the show, but now that I say that, I don't know. I had some trouble with the three women.
hmm,
Um, that it was interesting to watch them. I love all those actors. Carrie
hmm,
Coon was especially interesting.
yeah,
But the friendship felt pretty toxic to me, It was your classic triangulation.
yeah,
I saw some things online that said, never go anywhere with three people. Like three people it's a bad dynamic. And again, from a family systems perspective, three is often the dynamic in which you'll have a victim, a perpetrator, and a rescuer. So
mm,
there's often people have to sort of the roles may shift, like who's in what role, but often that's what's happening is somebody is the victim, somebody is the perpetrator, and somebody is the rescuer, and that's how they sort of interact with each other. And I feel like we saw a lot of moments of two of the women gossiping about the third, two of the women judging the third, and it was different dynamics of those, but everyone kind of got, an aspect of it. And triangulation is not the healthiest dynamic, right? Because
no,
it's not genuine love, it's not authentic. It's about managing stress, actually, is how my family systems teacher would talk about it, is that
hmm,
there's a stressor that comes up, and so these dynamics appear in order to help us kind of frame where to put things and how to respond to people and so on. And it made me think about, I feel like friendships has been an interesting thing for me in my life. When I was a lot younger, I would often have best friends, but they were kind of best frenemies. Like there would be
mm,
some toxicity with the female friendships that I had in my life. And that continued in different ways, throughout my life. And I kind of remember I had sort of a tight clique of girlfriends in high school, but often there would be dynamics like that where there would often be someone that was being gossiping about, and you never wanted to be that someone. You
yeah,
always wanted to be, on the side of the one talking, gossiping, not the one being gossiped about, even though you couldn't totally control that. And, there were a lot of dynamics around, like, I feel like sometimes when you have those really tight friend groups, they become cultish, actually. They become like family systems sometimes.
hmm,
And there are certain unwritten rules or whatever it is, and roles that are played, and it can be really hard to break out of those.
like the Mean
Um,
Girls of it all, where it's like, Gretchen's not allowed to wear the hoop earrings or whatever. Like,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's right. And, it's interesting because something that often happens is that when you try to change, it's often your oldest friends and your family that resist that change the most.
yeah,
And sometimes when a change like that is happening, you kind of have to figure out, like, okay, who again, to go back to that Buddhist principle, who in my life really sees me as a human being that has the the capacity and the right to change and grow
Mm,
and evolve.
yeah.
And within love relationships too, I think, that's an important question to ask is this person willing to grow with me? Is this person willing to support me in being who I am on my own terms, as opposed to who they think I'm supposed to be?
Yeah.
And so often when you're trying to evolve or change or heal, it's your friends that'll be like, what? Like, that's different. I don't like that you're doing
Hmm.
that. And I feel like I've had a few different moments in my life of kind of recognizing that some of the closest people around me were the ones that were not liking that I was changing or whatever it was, like just some issues coming up around that. And so, I think it's worth working on those relationships, and like old friendships are important. I mean, you and I have been friends for a long, long time. We both changed a lot too through our friendship.
Yeah.
But just because you've been an old friend isn't necessarily a good friend, right? Like those
Yeah.
are two different things. And so when at the very end, when the three girls were having that conversation, and Jaclyn was like, I just feel so good. I've just been in such a good mood all week. You're like, what? No, you haven't. Like, that's insane to say. And they're just like, I'm so glad we did this. It's like, were you there? Like,
You're not.
and then, and then Carrie Coon had that moment of like the beautiful monologue that came from a very authentic, honest place. But I feel like that could have been a moment where she said, I never have to hang out with these people again. Like, I can walk away from this, and maybe work on making some friends that can just meet me on that level of like, let's actually tell the truth and let's talk about where we're coming from and like what feelings are coming up. And, when we got sent to the old folks resort down the road or whatever, like, can we talk about how like we actually are middle-aged and that was insulting or that was funny or that was like, they never talked about that,
Yeah.
as something that would have been quite disturbing for all three of them. Instead they just continue to be like, we're hot and cool. Let's go like fuck some random guys and and like prove how cool and young we are. It doesn't have to be like that, Carrie Coon. Like
Yeah.
you could get some other middle-aged friends that are just middle-aged and that's
You're just cool
okay,
with
right?
it. Yeah, it was oh my gosh, so many thoughts of what you're saying there. I mean, I do think that Mike White writes women, like some women, really well. Like I think that he actually captured that dynamic like so accurately of like the
Yeah,
ways in which these women are
wasn't
like even
inaccurate.
Jaclyn just fully gaslighting, being like, and like just not even acknowledging it, being like, this always happens to me, or like whatever she said when Carrie Coon was like, so why are you doing that though? And she's just like, people always are like this to me. And it's like, you're not answering the question. Like, I feel like that's so real. Like the passive aggressiveness and like the Leslie Bibb MAGA moment, like, or like the Kate MAGA moment when she's like, like, are we really going to talk about Trump? Like, I just thought that was,
Yeah. Right after they were like, doesn't it get awkward with your friends when you talk about Trump? And it was like, no, it's awkward right now.
yeah,
Because, yeah,
because you're
we're
trying to
not on
talk,
the same
yeah,
team anymore or whatever. And you're just like,
yeah,
whoa, okay, whoa, didn't know that.
totally. And I think like, I just think that that dynamic was so accurately captured. I think where it sort of lost, well, I have a few thoughts, but like where it sort of not lost me, but like yes, Carrie Coon's monologue amazing, but I agree, I feel like her realization was not a moment, again, I'm seeing in the paratext online where people are saying that like, and see, you can just accept everybody and be in love. And I'm like, this is a deeply lonely and sad woman who has nobody and nothing, that she is willing to accept these friendships that are harmful and damaging to her spirit and herself. Like to
Yeah,
me, that is not a loving moment at the end. They're all piled. I'm like, it's cute because they are physically close because they've known each other since they were kids, but like they do not have any of the same values. It's really like, to me, that I thought that was so tragic. I thought that was another tragedy, like Shakespearean tragedy, that she is just like, I guess I just have to, I am deaded, like I am fated to be this way. Like
right.
this is my fate, is to be friends with these people and feel isolated and to feel alone. Like her saying like, my husband, like I tried to do love, that didn't work out. I tried my career, that didn't work out. I tried motherhood, that didn't work out. And so I guess what I have is you. And it's like, oh, and it's like,
Yeah,
I mean, we can't get into this conversation, but it's like to be middle-aged and to be trying to make friends at that age, it's really difficult. Like she actually feels like this is the only thing that she has. And so she better make some meaning out of it. And to me, that is like deeply tragic because you have, your friend Jaclyn, with you have a lot of jealousy for her. You really envy like her beauty and her confidence. And then you have Kate and her just like willingness and ignorance that makes her kind of happy, you know? And so it's like, but it's like, Laurie girl, you are not ignorant, and you don't have all that money to give you the facelift, you know, just a few touch-ups here and there. Like, that's not your life. So it's like, how can you find acceptance? And it is tragic to me that the only way to find that acceptance is in these people who are like just fundamentally very different from her. And, you know, she's a smart, cool woman. Like, she was the one that all the men wanted, you know, like she was the one who was having fun and like being cool. And like, actually in the moment when they were at the nightclub, like, you got the sense that Leslie, I keep calling her Leslie Bibb, but it's the character's name is Kate. It's not her,
Kate,
but
yeah.
like Kate's character did not want to be there. Jaclyn was so interested in making women who are younger than her jealous. And Laurie was the one who was like, I'll do the shot. Let's dance. Let's do it, you know? And also interesting, like this just came to me too, like when we were talking about they went to the old folks home, and then they immediately go to this like downtown celebration that they have no idea of the culture of Thailand, that they would have any idea what this day represents. Like, it's so funny to me. It's like, here's three white women who are just like, why are they pointing their guns at me? And it's like so funny that's like, we're so young. And then they go out and there's this really fun party happening in the streets and they're screaming and being like, don't get me wet, you know? And it's like,
Right, right, right. Yeah, I forgot that scene.
you're not young. Actually, if you were young, this would be very fun for you, but
And
you
you
don't
don't
want
have
to be
to
wet.
be. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to be, right? It
Nothing
doesn't
wrong with
have to be
wanting
like
to be
that.
dry, girl. Like, it sounds
Yeah, go get
great.
your massages at the resort. It's fine.
Literally. So in the paratext online, there was this conversation around how there was a deleted scene between the three women, and it was about how Carrie Coon's, Laurie's child, is non-binary. There's this whole conversation about how these women like don't understand this non-binary identity. And so there was a big discourse online from like the queer community being like, Mike White, cut a non-binary storyline. And like, I actually am really grateful for that, in seeing how that story unfolded and how it ended, because I do think that there is something about, you know, Mike White said something like, we're in a different time, right? Like when this season was filmed last year, I think February 2024, very different political time than we're currently in. And I think that if we were to see this moment play out where Laurie basically is just like, you know what, I accept you both, it would have been really harmful to the non-binary and trans community, because it's like, if there's a character, I'm assuming it's Kate, who doesn't understand this and who is actively being like, well, I don't get it, or whatever, we're kind of seeing those tropes played out. You know, I think that there's something about that where it's like, I'm actually relieved that he didn't include that story. It's like a sort of situation of like, nothing about us without us. Like, I have no doubt that Mike White can write a great non-binary character that introduces these conversations in a way that like puts the heat a little bit on people who are willfully misunderstanding us. And I don't think that this was the moment to do that, because it was like, let's use the identity of a non-binary person to show this awkward dynamic, where in actuality, like right now, we're not in a situation where we can really do that, because the situation is so serious when it comes to like being non-binary and like the rights that are at risk right now, like very much in a threat, especially in America. So I actually am really grateful that he didn't include that scene. I mean, we don't know what it actually, like what was said in that scene, but I'm really grateful that they didn't include that scene, because I do think that if there had been a scene come out where we saw Kate being like saying some really harmful stuff, and then at the end, the moral of the story for Laurie is like, you know what? And I just love you guys. I still do. It would have been. I'm like, that would have been such a bad thing to like represent on the show, that I'm actually just so relieved that we didn't have to deal with all of that, and that like maybe next season Mike White hires a non-binary actor. By the way, I'm available. I'm available, Mike. You want to bring me to Russia or wherever you're going? Let's do it. Wherever you're going next, I'll be there. Don't you worry. um, just follow me on Instagram at Emilee Nim. You know, send me a DM. Jenny Bilodeau, the characters. That's my rep. But anyway, like, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but yeah, I feel like, yeah, there's this thing of like, this is Laurie, who is like a principled woman who is faced with like, you know, and I'm a little envious that we didn't see that conversation that Jaclyn and Laurie had in the pool, like where they're talking about Kate, because we got to see the conversation between Jaclyn and Kate, and we got to see the conversation between Kate and Laurie, but we didn't get to see Jaclyn and Laurie be like, oh my God, she's voting for, like, she votes, like, she's Republican, you know, like, I think that we were robbed a little bit of that, but we did get to see Kate being like, in the, looking over the pool and being like, ooh, like seeing it, which was kind of funny, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so we can talk about Frank and his monologue. We've talked a little bit about him in terms of like that Buddhist perspective of being overindulgent and so on. But yeah, that monologue was really interesting. People had lots of things to say about it. And I guess it was that week or something I came across this quote from Margaret Atwood's Robber Bride. So I'll just read the quote. Male fantasies is everything run by male fantasies. Up on a pedestal or down on your knees, it's all a male fantasy. That you're strong enough to take what they dish out, or else too weak to do anything about it. Even pretending you aren't catering to male fantasies is a male fantasy. Pretending you're unseen, pretending you have a life of your own, that you can wash your feet and comb your hair unconscious of the ever-present watcher peering through the keyhole in your own head, if nowhere else. You are a woman with a man inside watching a woman. You are your own voyeur. So I thought it was interesting to come across that because in Frank's monologue, he talks about there's so much there, but he's kind of talking about wanting to witness himself being effed by himself,
Yeah.
essentially. And yeah, is this monologue about toxic masculinity, right? Like, is it about wanting to be seen in that highly masculine way? Is it about queerness, right? Like, is it about him sort of discovering a queer or trans identity within himself? Um, is that a positive or negative representation of that sort of trans queerness? Um, and that idea of having a man inside, like being a woman having a man inside, it's sort of this. I feel like a lot of season 3, as we talked about a bit, was about identity, right? And like how we're being perceived by other people and how um, that affects how we perceive ourselves and how important that is and so on. And, Saxon's trajectory, especially being about, that moment where he's like, everything in my life is tied up with your success, Dad. And like, if something's going on at work, I need to know because, otherwise I'm nothing or whatever it is. But that changes after, his experience. He's kind of like, maybe there's more to life than that. And again, we don't know what happens next after all that. But yeah, it's sort of like, is there always going to be specifically a man, maybe, in a patriarchal culture where the male gaze is a part of what we consume, the media we consume and other things, the way that we look at ourselves, you know, female gaze is an interesting concept that some people don't believe exists, right? Some people think there's no such thing as a female gaze, that that's not something that we can create with movies and TV and so on, because our whole culture is male gaze oriented around everything, right? Including how women see themselves, and how, people who are non-binary or have other genders or whatever, like that it's still male gaze, like wherever you look, is what some people believe. So, I think there was a lot in that monologue. I don't know that it's an easy one to just be like, it was about this or it meant this, but those were some of the questions that came up for me after listening to that and thinking about what does that mean about sexuality, identity, spirituality, all of these other things. There's so much there.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've listened to a bunch of like TikToks and stuff about it. I think that Kat Black from YouTube, she's like a veteran YouTuber, trans YouTuber from like long time. She had a really great analysis of it. But something that really stood out to me is like, the distinction for me for Frank and like somebody who is genuinely questioning their gender and having these, revelations is for Frank, I think it's coming from a place of dominance, wanting to possess and own. Like he wants to own this woman so much that he wants to become her, and he wants her to watch him as her being effed by someone who looks like him. Like he's so obsessed with himself and with with ownership specifically of women, that it's like he kind of comes through this and he understands it as being a spiritual thing, but I think that that's what's so um corrupt about that kind of spirituality, is because it's like, yeah, I mean, you can find meaning in anything, or maybe it's just debauchery. Like maybe it's just like, and maybe you're kind of becoming philosophical about it, but you're still not really considering your impacts on other people. When he makes that comment about how he hired like a young sex worker to watch him get like, penetrated, and I couldn't help but like think about her and like think about this young woman who it's like she's being paid to just like watch this, and he like specifically wants to make eye contact with her, and like I think that is like so weird and creepy and violent, that I'm like, I don't think that this is coming from a genuine place of like gender curiosity and gender expression, because I think that if it were, it would be coming from, there would be a more like he would have a sense of identity that is in flow, but he seems actually very attached to the identity of like this hunky man who he like this like very masculine guy who I'm assuming like him and Rick's business was killing people. Like I can, like I'm just like spitballing here, but pretty sure they maybe were assassins for hire. I don't know, but like
This and
coming from
that, this and that.
this and that, yeah, this and that. So like coming from a person who made a ton of money killing people, like probably it's he's still really attached to that identity, that I don't know that it's somebody being like, maybe I'm non-binary. And it's like I think like collectively the queer and trans community sort of joked like, okay, non-binary king, but it's like I don't think that that's a genuine reflection, and I think it's important. I think that our culture really struggles to distinguish between those things, where it's like, this is actually not somebody who is having a genuine reflection, and I think we can all acknowledge that. But like he is confused, I agree, but I don't think that he's confused in any meaningful way. Like when it comes to like sexuality and gender, I think that he is being debaucherous. He's being Dionysian. He's like having fun, and he's trying to ascribe meaning to it. But that does seem to be like a retroactive experiment where he's sort of like, well, I did this because of this and because I needed this, as opposed to like some genuine exploration. And I think it's really juxtaposed, which I really wish we got more of this character. But in one of the first few episodes, there is a trans woman as a hotel employee who's like pretty like, this is an old school term, but like she's probably considered to be quite stealth, like, and stealth for folks who don't know is like a trans community term where you're sort of incognito, you're not really visibly trans, like people might misconstrue you as a cisgender person. And I think that she's this character who I don't think has any lines, or maybe if she does, they're probably in Thai. But she, it's like one moment and she's kind of gawked at by one of the guests or whatever. But this is somebody who is like genuinely living their life as a trans person. Like this is a trans woman. She shows up to work. She's got to do her job and handle all these annoying, like rich Americans, like everybody else. And then she's on her way, and to compare that to the Frank character and the Frank monologue is like, this is somebody who is exploring this, but in a way of from a perspective of like torment and torture and humiliation and almost kink. Like there's a sort of like kink aspect to it that isn't, I think, rooted in like, because I don't think that like transness is a kinky thing. Like for people, I think that gender play can be an aspect of kink, but I don't think that there's anything inherently sexual or kinky about gender and trans identity. So the fact that for him it's all purely rooted in this sexual experience, to me is a big distinction. And I think that it's a complicated thing to pull apart, but I think it's necessary to pull apart because like, yeah, it's like, I think that when we talk about transness, and especially transness and the way that the culture is very scary for trans people right now, is like there's a real danger to living authentically for trans folks. It's like a real danger. Like I'm currently in a position where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to go to America like until things change. Like I actually don't think it's safe for me to cross the border. I'm pretty confident that my trans flag in my Instagram bio would get me flagged immediately. Like, I'm just like, I'm just not even going to go near that. And I feel very lucky that I don't have to, and I feel scared
Yeah.
for a lot of my trans friends who are in the States right now. And I think, yeah, it's important to like question that and to look at it and understand the differences between like trans identity people who are going to be really persecuted by legislation, by society, versus a character or a person like Frank is obviously a fictional character, but like a person that might fit that bill, or a person who might be having similar experiences. This is a person who can still experience no consequences from doing that. Like, how does he not have like STDs and stuff like that? Like, he's found a way to like avoid all consequences from like hiring all these sex workers to do these debaucherous things with him, and like having this really specific fetish and fetishizing Asian women, just like singularly, like that as its own complicated thing. And then the sexual fetishization of just like himself to himself, like it's all kind of I think a really specific thing that is distinguishable from like questions of gender and sexuality. Do I think that I don't think that it's like inherently bad that like this is somebody who's exploring something sexually. Like, if he's been upfront about these things with the people who he's hiring and they're comfortable with it, and if all of that is like consensual in some regard, like I think that that's okay to explore those things. But I think that it's important that we distinguish it from characterizing it as like a genuine trans like journey. I think that it is probably distinguishable, and maybe I'm wrong about that. Like, I don't know how. uh I've only listened to a few trans women speak about this, which is kind of where I'm being informed by this, but like I don't like, everybody's experience of that is different, and I don't want to just like say that it's a uniform experience for all of us, but that would be like my impression is like it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to explore, it's not okay to cause harm, but also it's okay to gain awareness as to like, am I genuinely questioning this, or am I just like doing this because I'm fetishizing it because it's this weird fantasy for me?
Yeah. And again, everyone's different in terms of what questioning sexuality and gender and so on might look like. And yeah, I mean, there you couldn't have more privilege, in terms of that. Like, he's using people to have these experiences that are not about love. Again, like they're
Mhm.
not about that kind of um non-attachment love where, you're seeing someone for who they really are and letting yourself be vulnerable and stuff. Like, none of that was what he was talking about. He wasn't
Mhm.
talking about love at all. Um, and not that that's necessarily what it has to be about, but yeah, that was about, I think you're right, domination. You know, and I think there was something about like that quest for domination that kind of paralleled Rick's quest for domination. Um, to the point where it was so deep, like he kept going so deep with it that it was like coming to a place of wanting to dominate himself, like to be so dominant that he could dominate himself. Like, that is such a narcissistic, capitalist, toxic masculinity, like extreme, right?
Mhm.
To the point where I'm so focused on dominance that I'm even going to dominate myself, like to the point where I'm sort of in this never-ending cycle, and there's no end to that, right? And these themes of identity that we're talking about, identity, addiction, taking responsibility, for your actions, the consequences of your actions, and so on. Like, all of that stuff kind of came up in the monologue in different ways.
Mhm.
And of course, it was also one of those like oddly funny moments where White Lotus is like a dark comedy is sort of its genre, right? And it was like Walton Goggins' reaction faces were just so great, He's just like, oh, like how do I absorb this? Because I think that's what we were all doing, is kind of like, whoa, like how do we absorb this?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that in this season. I guess there often is in White Lotus, but it's just, again, it's how extreme things can go when you don't have consequences, I guess. Like,
Mm.
when you get to be outside of the daily grind. And then again, do what about those internal consequences and so on? Like,
Totally.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, overall, did you enjoy the season?
I did. I know that a lot of people had qualms with it, with the pacing and stuff like that. Um, but I do enjoy like the kind of bickering, like slow build. I think that there's so much within the dynamics of people that is really fun to like analyze and examine and think about. And like I think that there's a lot of themes that carried throughout, but I think that it felt different, but I still really liked it. I still really enjoyed it. How about you?
I really enjoyed it. I didn't mind the slower pacing, and I kind of liked that experience of waiting a week for each episode. Um, and I think those paratexts affected the way that I was reading it. Because I guess when you're binging something, normally you don't have so much time in between each episode to think about what's going to happen next and come up with theories and things like that. So I think I was a little disappointed in the finale, just in terms of like I said, I wanted more from Mook's character. Um, I think that the Chelsea Rick ending was interesting. Like I think in that Shakespearean way, I think it was interesting. Um, I would kind of want to know the aftermath of the Ratliff family, but at the same time, I think it's okay that it's left as a bit of a question because you can kind of sit with like, wow, that was a lot for them to process, and you can kind of imagine what happens next. Like I don't think every story has to tie up every loose
Hmm.
end necessarily, and there are things I wouldn't have thought about necessarily if the internet hadn't pointed it out to me. Like oh, there was that moment where Kate recognized Victoria, and Victoria was just like, I don't remember you. And that never came up again. But like, I don't know. Maybe it was just a moment of being like, Victoria's a bit out to lunch and like doesn't, she has
Yeah,
this judgment about like who's a classy rich and who's trashy rich and whatever it was. And
totally. And I
maybe
feel
that's all
like,
we needed to know from that moment,
yeah,
like,
yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I remember seeing that moment being like, yeah, I don't know. Like in the end, I guess what it really just represented was like what you're talking about, the cult of the family. Like it's just like she's just like, no, stay away from us. Like you're not part of our
Yeah, like
cult.
I only want to be with the people that I'm here with and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, we didn't
Um,
talk about Belinda.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Belinda storyline, that I was a little disappointed with as well, and I have heard that Belinda's coming back in season 4, so maybe there will be more to that story. But I loved that moment when she and Pornchai got together, and that moment where she goes, "This is consent. Do you have that here? We're new to it." She
We're
said
just
something
we
like
just
that.
started. Yeah.
We just started. It was so sweet, and it really did feel like they were equals, and I loved that relationship for her, and I loved um seeing that develop. And then the moment when he said like maybe we should start a business together, I was like, "Ooh, is he trying to take advantage of her now?"
Yeah.
Like I wasn't sure what that meant, and I still don't know, right? But then, as again many people on the internet pointed out, she was flipping. She's now become Tanya essentially, in doing that to him, what was done to her. But at the same time, I mean, I feel like similar to Gay Talk's story, like I don't know how black and white that is because I love for her that she's gonna have a break and start her business and be rich or whatever. Um, and I think her son also kind of pointed out like, well, what are your choices here, right? Because he knows
Hmm.
and you can take the money and he'll leave you alone and you can just go live your life with the money, or you can know and not take the money and then he'll come after you. And is she in control of the police coming and actually keeping her safe
Yeah.
from him? Like she's, again, to bring back that privilege, like he's someone with an insane amount of privilege. And the way he described it to her too with the money, he was just like, hey, Tanya told me that you were going to start this business together. She would have wanted this for you. Like it was a veiled bribe. She never had to say that she knew,
Yeah.
what he was referring to. And it wasn't confirmed. Like it's not like she had any evidence on him.
Yeah.
She just suspected, like she knew that he was there and that Tanya died, and that's all she knew. Like that's all the information she had, really. And he just didn't want her to point out where he was. So I feel like it was ambiguous in that
Yeah.
way. And I think there's also a way of reading it where it's like, well, she had a fling on vacation, like it was nice, but she doesn't owe him anything. Like she doesn't owe him
Totally.
staying in Thailand or risking her life for him or anything. Like she doesn't owe
Yeah.
him anything. Like she can just go live her life. So I think there was a way of reading that says like Belinda's on the dark side now, but I don't know that that's totally true. So I think
Yeah.
that was a little unresolved. I kind of want more of that story, and I think season 4 will bring it. Like I like the idea that even though with White Lotus there are often characters you never see again, there are some through lines. So and there are more seasons to come. So
Yeah.
there may be more richness to the story in like its larger sense over time. Maybe that's not the end of those stories, right?
Totally. And I agree. I don't think that it was a direct parallel. I think there were really important distinctions between her situation with Tanya versus her situation with Pornchai, where it was like, yes, he approached her. Whereas Tanya made this like promise, like almost like she was like baiting her, like, you're so special and talented. I'm going to give you all this money to open a business. Like, that's kind of a
Right,
cruel thing to do to somebody and not follow through with, like somebody who's
right.
living like paycheck to paycheck, showing up to work every day, clocking in. And what I loved about this, like her, like, yeah, I agree. She doesn't owe him anything. He brought that up to her. She never agreed to it. Like, she never said, yeah, let's drop some
No,
plans.
she never agreed to it. Yeah.
Like even the fact that she was at the White Lotus doing this like 3 month, internship or like skills trade or whatever it was, like she was still kind of like beholden to the company at that point. So like for him to be like, we should go out on our own together is like, she's in the middle of this training. Like, like that is a bit like, that's kind of intense for
And like,
somebody
does
to
she
say
want to
that.
move to Thailand? Like, yeah,
Yeah. Like,
would
where
be a
is, like,
lot.
what is his, what is this all about? So I don't think that she owed him. And then the thing that I really appreciated about that moment as well was like, and they said this on the White Lotus podcast, but it's like this is somebody whose whole life and like whose dreams in their like quote unquote dreams in their life are sort of limited by a ceiling of reality. Like this is a single
Right.
mom who's a Black woman who lives in Hawaii, who has a son who she had presumably quite young. And based on like how old he is and how old Natasha Rothwell looks, like I don't think she was like that old when she had this kid. But like I think what's interesting about that is like, the idea of like, this wealthy benefactor will give you all this money to open your business. And like, wouldn't that be great? Because then you could be in service to me in perpetuity because you'd have an outlet to do that. And I could always come to you and get free massages or whatever, right? Like, it's like, wouldn't that be such a great dream for you? And it's like, what's that mean? That's like, I do not dream of labor. Like somebody's like, what's your dream job? I do not dream of labor. Like wealthy people don't have to have dreams that are like, what if I had a business? Like often they do, and they find ways to like exploit that and make money off of it. But for a character like Belinda, it's like the maximum dream she could have is to still be laboring and like giving treatments to like wealthy white people. And so for her in the moment to just be like, just let me be rich for 5 seconds is like, she's got to recalibrate. Her dreams are probably different now. Like she doesn't have to like have a business to survive. She can literally live off of this money in like a high interest savings account and probably make that money earn money for her and maybe not have to, like 5 million in this economy, not, crazy or anything, but like she probably doesn't have to like immediately start and go back to work. Like she doesn't have to do that. She can escape, which is probably the safe thing to do, considering this man is very scary and clearly powerful because he clearly killed his ex-wife or was involved. So it's like, yeah, just like let the girl be rich for a few seconds and let her recalibrate. What is her dream? Like maybe her dream is to invest in somebody else's business so that she doesn't have to be the one doing all the labor. Like, to expect like a Black woman to constantly be doing the labor for people is like such an assumption in the culture, like in
Uh-huh.
like wealthy white culture, that it's like, yeah, maybe let her just be a rich person. Let her be, at the beginning of the season when she sees the other, like that Black couple played famously by two Survivor cast members that Mike White was on Survivor with. We love to see it. He's done that every season. But like for her in that moment where like her character recognizes that and sees the other, Black folks at this resort who are like living it up, like fully adorned in like beautiful like garments, and like they're wealthy and they're like, we are here enjoying this resort. And she's like, like that. I think there's probably a bit of like, wow, look at how amazing somebody can do it. And now she has all this money. Like she can be that woman in the resort being like, I'm here. I'm here and I've got this money too. So So I do, yeah, I feel like it's very different. It's a very different situation because Tanya had money to begin with and then kind of dangled the carrot and then effed off and then died, fabulously or hilariously rather, where she conks her head. But like, Belinda, it's a very, very different situation. So I actually appreciate that she's like, actually, I don't need to stay here. I don't need to do any of this anymore. And that's really nice, at least for now.
Does Greg even know he didn't actually kill Tanya? Because he set her up, but then the gays were trying to murder her, and
These days. Yeah,
yeah,
he
and
killed his
she
lover.
escaped actually. Yeah, but her death was actually not caused by, it was an accident, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that's such a good point, and it really makes me think of this book, Rest is Resistance, that by Tricia Hersey that I read, maybe a year ago, and it really changed the way I think about rest.
Mm.
And her perspective is as a Black woman living in America, and just the benefits that people who live in America, mostly white people and so on, have gotten from the slave trade, right? From literally using Black bodies to create the infrastructure that like we still use to this day, really.
Mhm.
And that rest is a way of radically reclaiming your body from white supremacy and capitalism.
Mhm.
And in the book, she talks about it as something that's like it's not just liberation for Black people; it's for everyone's liberation
Mhm.
from grind culture, because we all participate in this. And I think that's such a good point that the idea that Tanya's dream would be to labor probably for rich white people, and that with porn chai in Thailand it would be the same thing, right? Like they would have sort of a luxury spa and probably tourists would visit it and so on. But given enough money and not having to do that, I do not dream of labor. Like, yeah, maybe we're not here to just be automatons in the capitalist cogs in the machine or whatever it is. And I think a lot of us have a hard time even thinking outside of that structure. And that's something that I think about a lot. I mean, I love the work I do. I'm very, very privileged in the work that I do. It's all stuff that I find like incredibly meaningful and enriching and all of that stuff. Like, I think if I had a lot of money, there are certainly certain things I wouldn't stop doing. I'd keep doing it, maybe at a different pace or whatever it is. But I've always been someone that's been really motivated by work, and I've always done a lot of work, and sometimes to my detriment. And it's very interesting to kind of think about like, what if you just had this radical sense that your body was yours and
Mm.
you could do what you wanted with it, and it wasn't always about doing for someone else, and it's something that comes up with quite a few of clients of mine as well, is like,
Mm.
what am I supposed to be doing with my life? This sort of feeling that we should be making other people's lives better in some way, which I do, and that's a part of what's important to me. But really, what does that come down to? Again, it's sort of that Chelsea Rick thing where it's like, are you here to, save the world or fix things? Or, could the meaning of life, I talked about this in my podcast about soul, like, could the meaning of life be just being in a body well, like just having good
Mm.
experiences with your body, whether, some of that is work related, pleasure related, like rest related, whatever it is, like you only get a body for so long. And maybe that's all it's about, is not, doing this incredibly meaningful thing and having a body. And I mean, in a way, I'm kind of speaking the Victoria Piper language of like, if you have the privilege, you must enjoy it. Obviously that's sort of a complicated thing. And like, I do still feel like I'm someone that comes with a lot of privilege. And I feel like it is a responsibility that I share that, and that I do good things with it, and that I, elevate, other people when I can, and so on.
Mm.
Um, and also, yeah, I think there's a little grind culture in there. I think there's a little earning my right to exist, right?
Yeah.
And like, what if we all didn't feel that we had to earn the right to exist? So anyway, to bring that all back to Belinda, I think there is a part of me that sees that story and is just like, yeah, let her be rich for a while, let her enjoy it. Like, I don't know, it's all so ambiguous, and it comes back to that same question that Gay Talk and some of the, and Timothy and some of the others were grappling with, is like, what's the greatest good here? Like,
Mhm.
these people in my family are telling me they don't want to live if they don't have money, so should I kill them? I mean, from an ethical perspective, like philosophical perspective, like, yeah, you can ask that question, right?
Yeah.
um I don't know. I think, yeah, I think it's complex. So, I'm sure there's lots more to talk about and think about, because White Lotus just has so much to it. But yeah, that was really good to just sort of unpack some of those things. I really appreciated a lot of what you had to say. And I think, as we're still processing this season, it was good to just talk about it.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear too, those of you listening or watching, leave your comments. Like, we'd love to know your takes on all of this stuff, and how all that's going. And yeah, do you want to say where people can reach you, or if you want to plug anything, or
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Emilee Nim, Emily spelled EmilieNim. And otherwise, no, nothing on the go. Just follow me there.
so thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Soundstripe.
Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to this conversation with me and Emilee Nimetz on the White Lotus Season 3. We will see what Season 4 has in store. Really looking forward to it. Would love to know what you think. If you have comments, if you have thoughts that you want to share, please feel free to share those wherever you're listening to this podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you like. So feel free to do that. You can find out more about me at juliepeters.ca. I'm on Instagram at Julie Peters Wellness, TikTok at Popcorn Therapy, where we'll post little clips of these episodes that we do. And you can also send me a tip if you feel like it. You can share a couple bucks. This podcast is totally free. It's just we're doing it for the joy and the love of it. So if you do feel like buying me a coffee, you can go to juliepeters.ca/tipme. If you want to. It also really helps to support me and the podcast if you just share it with people, let people know that you listen, share the episode, like, subscribe, all that stuff. So I really hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Emilee and I, and we will catch up with you next time whenever that comes. We're not going to expect a huge amount of regularity from the podcast right at the moment. So if you subscribe, you'll get those notifications that new podcasts are coming out. And if you follow me on Instagram and stuff, you'll see too. So we will be in touch and looking forward to hearing from you too.